It happens, and it just happened. Hey, Gazzy, welcome to the pre-show.
Danke. How are you doing?
Not too bad at all. Now, what we're going to do is quickly sanity check what is happening with the various streams that are taking place at the moment. So this is where you get to say something interesting while I get to bounce around the channels and check what's going on.
But if I was going to say something interesting, I'd need to be an innately interesting person. And that's not the case. I mean, I'm sitting on an IKEA couch for crying out loud. It's about as uninteresting as you can get.
Well, we'll have to try and do something like that. It does look as if the WildStar show is rounding itself to a close. Maybe someone will allow some people from there to wander over here a little while we get set to talk about all things that have happened this week. So I'm going to switch back to our own little control panel here and say hello to those of you who are landing. It is good to have you with us. And those of you who have landed, do us a favour, please. By all means, hit up your Twitters, your social medias, your things like that, and let people know we are now starting about 10 minutes late, so people know what to expect. So on that note, while people are frantically making like a lop and tippy-tappying away, what have you been up to this week, Gazimoff?
So this week I have been mostly trying to play WildStar and kind of squeezing it into these odd nooks and crannies in my life, because this week has been abnormally hectic with work-type stuff, which is terrible.
Does that mean we can now officially say that all your nooks and crannies are full of WildStar?
Yes, I think you can officially say that.
There we go. And I, of course, have had the luxury of deliberately taking the majority of the week off work. Didn't manage to take all of it off. Things intruded. But I've got myself up to a reasonable level. So come on then, Gazimoff. Cards on the table. Where have you got yourself to?
Level 20.
Level 20. It's a good solid start. And
Yeah.
to surprise some, not quite max level yet, but kind of 44 and 96%. And that 96% is important.
Yeah, well, some people had the week off work. Other people have had to do work. You know what's terrible? I can't play WildStar because I'm writing about WildStar. Come on.
I suppose at least you're interacting with WildStar.
On the peripheries.
On the peripheries. Okay, so let's go back, cast our memories back to early Saturday morning for those of us in the EU. And let's run through how it's gone. I guess the start point is, although we're going to be sort of highlighting perhaps some of the glitches, some of the communication, going through the process, I've got to take that top-down view and say, I think they're settled for a launch like this.
So, let's put it to pieces, as is R1.
Yes.
There are a couple of problems which have cropped up. Let's be fair about it. Some of them, like the distributed denial of service attack that started to hit Carbine servers at launch time, were completely not their fault. But there were other issues. Servers very, very quickly got very, very full. Now, I know Cougar, the IT live ops head, I know he took a very pessimistic view when he was putting together the server lists and deliberately said, look, we want to keep things small so that you end up with big servers full of people, thriving economies, that kind of thing. And I can completely get...
We can say we understand the logic of a full server population. Anyone that's existed in time in a game with a low server pop knows the difficulties it can throw your way.
Yeah, completely agree with that logic. Can't fault it at all. However, there were a couple of issues when the queues got very full very quickly, and it took a fair amount of time for new servers to spin up. Now, I do know some groups of people who, for example, were looking to build particularly PvP communities, and they had problems where they wanted to get their allies and their rivals on the same server that they were playing.
Yeah.
When you've only got one PvP server, that's fine fairly easy and straightforward. It's a bit frustrating to get on, but
It
you live
starts
with
quite
it.
easy.
It starts quite easy. But when you then suddenly go from one PvP server to 3 or 4, I think it is now, and people start spreading out, it's like, well, how do you logistically manage that? And that's not so much Carbine's issue because, hey, they're actually cranking up more servers to meet demand. But it does mean that as a guild leader, you end up with some real headaches about what you're trying to do. And I do kind of feel for those people stuck in that position.
Yeah. We had enough headaches just with the which server, obviously due to the server types that are available. So before we go on into those logistics, let's look at the timeline of what actually happened to kick off. So we're all there raring to go, munching our toast and marmite, or smoked kippers in the case of one person, not me.
I had a full English, I'll have you know, breakfast of champions.
Very good. I decided to basically stay in bed till about 30 minutes before launch and then get up because I was planning a long, long day. So, first of all, it's fair to say we couldn't log in the moment the gates opened. But it seems that not very many people could at all.
No.
I'm going to estimate, and memory's a tricksy thing, the first logins we were seeing were probably an hour after the official start time. Does that
I would say
sound
something
and
like
feel about right?
Yeah, about an hour to an hour and a half. Carbine very quickly worked out what was going on, and then it was a case of getting everything in place to actually eliminate that attack that was causing them problems and work around it. It's one of those annoying things. You can't predict how these things are going to cause problems until they do, and then you've got to just filter out the traffic and mitigate against it.
Yeah. And of course, there's going to be quite a lot of cynicism, I guess, when they suddenly go, "Oh no, we're fine. It's a DDoS." People are going to, especially with what's happened with names and other things in recent history, going to go, "Well, really?" But there was plenty of evidence floating around that was actually the case.
Oh yeah, there were some fantastic charts kicking around showing the huge maelstroms of traffic that were landing on Carbine's auth servers, both in the US and EU, that were causing no end of headaches. And there's not much you can do about that at all.
No, so all in all, I'd have to say an hour to do the necessary things with the network layers and the routing and stuff I won't get into because it's boring for most people. Actually, that's not a bad response. So in terms of infrastructure, I think availability, and I pick my words very carefully here, load management, ticking box. Technical stuff worked.
Oh yeah, the only thing I would say is I do kind of feel for our American colleagues, particularly Pacific American colleagues and in fact, no, East Coast American colleagues, who were staying up until very early in the morning to try and get their first slice of Nexian life, only to find that they're going to have to wait for an hour or so because of circumstances outside of Carbine's control.
Yeah.
For those people, I really do feel for you because it kind of sucks when you stay up for that. But for us, it just meant I had more time to read the morning paper.
And in our case, we had a lot of banter taking place on TeamSpeak. And to be fair, a lot of fun was had. There was a lot of jokes, a lot of humour. And that's the guild life. So I guess the guild experience, particularly for those groups that sort of came together to jump feet first into Nexus, an hour's not really a big deal.
I do kind of envy your guild experience because I know I deliberately said, no, can't play Exiles, cannot do it, can't even stomach it, and wanted to play Dominion on the roleplay server, which is Lightspire. Did not get myself a guild organized beforehand. So I have an awesome leveling buddy. I'm playing with Keris, my wife, and we're chomping through content at a frantic rate of knots. But yeah, we don't have that kind of guild banter thing going on. So we are currently on the prowl for a guild.
Indeed, I saw your tweet earlier. So I'll be intrigued to see where you end up. I mean, of course, you could always, correct the the mental imbalance that's currently plaguing your choice between Exile and Dominion, and come join us. The offer is there. But I'm sadly, I don't have the meds to correct this particular issue at this point in time, so I'll have to leave you be.
Sure for life. Sorry.
Anyhow, let's go back to where we are. So we basically have ascertained that technical infrastructure worked. We logged in. And then there was the question of where are you going to log into? And unfortunately, this is where things started to get a little thorny. PvP, Hazak, EU, we'll start there because that's the territory we're really talking about. It got a bit full and a little bit faster than perhaps some people thought might happen.
Yeah. So here's the thing. During beta, PvE reigned supreme. When they span up PvP for PvP week, it was like, oh, I don't like PvP. And then when they did it during open beta, people weren't really going onto the PvP server that much. People were much more enthusiastic about PvE content and seeing much of Nexus. This is an interesting thing to look at in terms of people's beta preferences versus their live game preferences, because it seems that in live game there are a lot more PvP fans out there.
Well, we can look at why that might be. There are some theories floating around. I mean, the first of which is, okay, let's be candid. Not everyone playing a beta is there for the primary reason of testing and bug reporting. I wish it wasn't so, but I have been persuaded that some people were there perhaps not for the love of typing /bug. They were perhaps there to get a good look around, get perhaps a mental head start, understand their pathing through zones, get a good handle on what it was they were going to do on launch and on live to try and make sure that they were being as efficient as possible. Not to mention, of course, that do I want to play the game? And it's a very valid thing to do, particularly in the open beta. But, excuse me, choking. Because of this, a lot of people that have every intent of PvPing were going, let me use this to get as much information as possible. But in the process, we passed some information back to Carbine. And that information was, we all want to play PvE. Yeah.
I also think that there are a lot of people who played beta but didn't want to overplay it and risk getting burned out. I know when I was at the London community meetup that Anlath organised, thank you Anlath for organising that, it was really, really good fun. That was at London Comic Con, or during London Comic Con in a nearby pub. That experience was fantastic. I'm speaking to a lot of fans though. They were saying, well, we've been playing beta, but we didn't want to overplay it. We kind of dipped our toes in it, got a feel for the game, made sure it was a game that we wanted to play, and then that was it. We closed the box, put it away, and we'll come back to it once the game goes live. And that I can completely get. But even in that room, most of the people I spoke to were more excited about things like hardcore raiding and digging into the story than going in and doing PvP. I think that a lot of them saw PvP as something they would do while they're playing, but it wouldn't be the main reason they would be playing. So I find that interesting.
Yeah, and that's valid. The other thing that may have happened as well, particularly in beta, is when we transferred from sort of US to EU, there was an arbitrary, this server is now French, this server is now PvE, this server is now PvP. And of course a lot of people will just say, I'll just stay where I am. And basically enact a no choice because their tunes are there. So it must be said there is perhaps a question mark on the validity of the data that could be gained because of those few things. But whereas it's easy to critique and go, well, is this data accurate? Why did they rely on it? That doesn't answer the question, what other data were they supposed to use instead to base the decisions on?
Yeah, exactly. You can only make your judgments based on two different things: what the data tells you and previous experience with doing MMO launches. And let's put it this way: this has been a fairly smooth launch in the grand scheme of MMO launches. Yeah. There was one thing they said they had a dupe bug, and in the time between the dupe bug being discovered, exploited, and patched, they had something like 12 people exploiting it. Now, I'm sure that you and I can think of a couple of occasions where there have been significantly higher numbers than that.
Yeah. I also could think of a few occasions where it's taken significantly longer than that to get something patched out, even when it's well known. I couldn't possibly comment on things like posting negative auctions on an auction house in a game for nearly a week to generate money, but it's that.
Yeah. There was things like, being able to rapidly click on inventory items in your guild bank and duplicating them. I can't think of something like that being unpatched for 2 weeks since beta.
I have to say, though, that if that's an example of the rapid response, kudos. Very, very nice indeed. I guess you probably have to be a little assumptive about the fact the fix was easily found and patched, and we don't know the exact timescales concerned, but just the ability to find, trace, identify, fix, resolve, test, push, and only have 12 people in the wide world pick up on it. Yeah, that bodes very well for future. Yeah. So we now have a bunch of people on a server, and we have rather long queues. Now, I don't know the queuing experience of everyone. I'm going to look out of the channel here and say, okay, guys, what were the queuing experiences? And I'm going to see what responses we've got. I've also got some comments from various people. Comments about tree hugging and PvP mainly. That doesn't help me with queue lengths. So the longest queue that I personally saw was around 40 minutes. And this was on Eco. And this was prime time, I think, Sunday afternoon. That's pretty much the only queue that I ran into.
So I'll give you two extremes. Lightspire, the roleplay server, no queues. Hazak,
at any point?
No queues at any point on Lightspire. It's been beautiful to play on. It's got a nice big community. It's sometimes high pop, sometimes medium pop, but never full, which is great for me because it means I just dive on. Hazak, however, has had queues and queues and queues. Now, there was a period of time where the queue time estimating tool was incorrect, but I've been on Hazak and it's estimated 8-hour queues, and I'm thinking, no, that can't be right. I've not sat through them to actually empirically find out. I know that our good friend Screenager has experienced Hazak's queues to a fair extreme, but I don't think they've been as bad as the estimating tool has come out and said.
So, Screen, as I know you're there, and when the delay catches up, you're telling us you're still getting 3 to 4 hour queues on Hazak. Is that an estimated time, or is that the actual time you can expect to sit in the queue to be able to log in? And we'll take a moment and get that reply and see where we are. Other people, of course, have reacted to that. And guilds and communities have two choices. They can wait for an official response, roll with it, see what they can do. Or they can do something proactive. And many guilds have gone proactive and said, well, we're just going to change. Because I think we saw, was it 3 new Euro PvP servers in 24 hours? If memory serves me correctly. And the first one, I believe, was 2.5 hours after the start of the game.
Yeah. Not only that, but Carbine have now turned around and offered free realm transfers as well. So, for example, if you're on Hazak, you can transfer free of charge to Contagion, Gaius, or Deadstar. And those were in on June the 3rd. So the day the game went live, they cranked up free realm transfers, which, that's pretty good going, considering that it took certain games months before they even had the capability to do that. So,
okay, now Screen's come back and give us a confirmation. So currently, that wait time is a real world wait time. I'm not sure how consistent it is, but frequently they are looking at, from what I'm seeing, a queue of 3 to 4 hours to log in. Now that leaves you with a real dilemma. Migration options aside, do you bear with it as a community? Do you anticipate that it will even off over time? And do you stay with the place where you've got your alliances and your anti-alliances and your rivals and your community? Or do you turn around and say, this is too much?
So here's what I think is going to happen. First of all, I think that this evening or tomorrow will be interesting to watch, because there are probably going to be a fair few people who bought WildStar or pre-ordered it more correctly, got their pre-order code, registered the pre-order code, have not bought the game. Their code runs out today, I think. So if those queues continue as they are, then it means one interesting fact: most people who pre-ordered it have probably gone and bought it. And I'm going to celebrate that, because that'll be pretty nice.
It's very good for the long-term health of the game. Not so good if you're one of the people sitting in the queue right now.
Exactly. So that's going to be the first thing I'm quite interested in. And I'm actually, I think that I think they call it the attach rate, or conversion rate or something like that, is actually pretty strong for WildStar from what I've seen myself.
Do we know an industry average, and have we had any feedback as to where we think they're going to be?
So there are two interesting metrics that crop up when you look at pre-orders. Generally speaking, I think it's about 70% of people who pre-order a game go out and actually buy it, give or take. That depends on a number of things, like if you're doing collector's editions or anything like that, and what edition people generally tend to pre-order. But I think that's generally speaking about that figure. The key difference is now, however, that Carbine were offering pre-orders for the full game, where you paid the full whack in advance and you then went off and bought it. This isn't the case where you pay something like a £5 or $5 deposit for a pre-order code, and then you have to go and buy the full game if you're still interested. The key metric to look for, though, is the 2-month-in measure.
Yeah.
Theme park MMOs typically have a post-launch drop, and it's usually about 50%. So you'll lose about 20% of the people who bought the game won't subscribe, and then of those subscribers, 20%, and you'll lose another 20% in the after they've played the second month. So it's basically everyone who forgot to cancel after the first month usually remembers to cancel after the second month, or in the second month. So you end up with about half the players who bought the game stick with it, and then you start to get a ramp up. And every game, including World of Warcraft, has followed that trend. They've dropped down, they've plateaued for a bit, and then maybe they started building up as people have said, well, actually, this is the game for me, and I'm going to pull my friends in and play it. And people and the dev community have started churning out their new content. Or in certain other MMOs, it's just been the start of a long, gradual decline into obscurity. It's going to be really interesting to see where WildStar goes with that. And I think if we still see the same number of servers or more servers emerging 2-3 months in, then that's very, very encouraging.
And pretty unusual, let's say, as well. It's not a frequent occurrence in the MMO market. So let's let's rewind a second and go back to these issues to do with servers. We're going to other things like box product and game experience and other bits and pieces, and new content already. So free transfers have been started up, but of course people can now be a little fragmented. You might have some people on one server, some people on another. There were times, I think, where you were automatically being rerouted to another server, I believe, at one point. Or didn't have the option of logging into Hazak. So there was a point, if you wanted a PvP server, there would only have been one available to you. Then there would have been another point where the only server available to you was yet another different one. And this has caused a situation whereby some guilds currently have their members distributed between more than one point. And not all of those points are being allowed transfers into the same places. So I've seen some examples in the forums today, and I'm going to get my names wrong. Prego, I think, would be one that's being affected by this. Some of your guys can move to server A, some of your guys can move to server B, but without re-rolling, you can't get everyone in the same place. Now, clearly that's going to cause some frustration. Clearly, people don't want to re-roll. I mean, I would be aghast at the thought of re-rolling at level 45 already. What should the reaction be at this point? Do you think this is the first in a step of measures to solve this problem? Or do you think community is going to have to take a long, hard look and bite the bullet and make a choice and go with it?
Okay, so I think that the next steps that Carbine need to do are basically online but not in-game account management services. So currently you have to log into the game, sit in the queue for 4 or 5 hours, and then you get the option to transfer. That's call me judgmental, but that's bad.
It's possibly appropriate, though, as a mechanism to get the services launched this quickly because of the needs around them.
Yeah. What I would like to see is Carbine's web services team crank up pretty quickly to offer things like online but not in-game realm transfers, account facilities, stuff like that. I mean, you can already buy the name change service from your account management. So you can log into your account and buy for, I think it's $20, a name change token. I would like to see the whole realm transfer process be offered not just in-game, but out of game as well. So you don't have to sit in the queue, particularly if those queues are going to last longer than, say, a couple of weeks. I would like to see that taken off to part of the account management page. I do agree with you in terms of, I think it's sensible to allow guilds to start coordinating where they are as well. And I want to see guilds being able to start actually collecting their members together and putting down routes as well.
And it must be said as well, I mean, there's been a comment in channel about perhaps some of the distribution is yes, there's been issues, but, you know, communication and perhaps inexperience on the part of guild leads. And let's be honest, it's not an easy thing to do. Once you've been through the mill a few times, you know the ins and outs and how to manage your communication with a larger team. For people doing it for the first time or stepping up to that role for the first time, I'm not surprised to see people making less than optimal choices as guilds and individuals, because it's I've got to log in, quick, let me do something, what's happening, I need to be leveling, and it's very easy in that scramble to not just step back and make the best possible choice. So I think we're on the same page that we'd like to see some more steps, even if it's on a case-by-case basis, and even if it takes some time to try and resolve that a little more for people as time goes on.
Yeah. At the end of the day, I kind of think about it like this. Is it better to see someone sitting in a queue for most of their evening gaming just so they can transfer for the following night? Or does it give them a better experience to be able to log into a web page, click a few buttons, and be playing that evening? You get that immediacy, that kind of sense of, okay, now I can do something about it, sort myself out, and go and start playing the game rather than sitting around waiting for it. That's the kind of, standard customer experience stuff which Carbine need to kind of grab by the horns.
So I'll pose the awkward question. Now, I don't know the answer to this, both the statement I'm going to make and the long-term solution. So my first one is a question. Can you currently create a new character on Hazak today, should you choose to?
I have no idea.
I'm assumptively assuming the answer to that is no, based on the population issues. Now, if someone could correct me or confirm that for me, that would be fantastic. I have been far too busy desperately attempting to not fall behind the leveling curve to go and play on other servers at this minute in time. And carrying on my assumptive line of reasoning, what should Carbine do in the scenario where someone is part of a guild that's established on Hazak, didn't manage to get in before the server got potentially locked, the guild isn't moving, and now they want to rejoin their guildmates? And how many cases but I want to be on Hazak, a part of that, I'm part of this community, and how many are, let's be really honest, hey, this is an excuse to get to Hazak, because I suspect long term it's going to be seen as one of the premium founding PvP servers. It raises a dilemma.
So here's the thing. I think that in the short term, congratulations, you now have a perfect opportunity to find some new people to play with. I think also, if you really want to play with people on Hazak, get in a few. I don't think circles across server, but I know you can add people to your friends list and stuff like that. So get people on friends lists, start forming cross-server groups together, and start going into battlegrounds as groups like that. You can friend people who are on other servers through the account friending system, I believe. And that's what I would probably recommend to those people, to say, okay, if you've got friends on Hazak that you still want to play with, get them on your friends list as soon as possible and do instant cross-server content with them. That's pretty much the best way I would recommend for you to do that. But there's not much else we can do.
Two tools that people might or might not be aware of. One you've just mentioned. You can whisper someone with name at server, and as long as you're within the EU or the US data centers, that will go through. Some people may not also know that you can go /AW name, and this is the account whisper feature. Yeah. So as long as you've been account friended, and again, I have not tested if you can account friend cross server, but I believe you can, because I know you can /AW at. You'll be able to speak to someone without needing to know what character they're logged in as or anything else. And that's even more useful when you're remotely distributed. Now, I'm going to move on and change the topic for a moment. The reason I know about /AW is down to that. Now, this is actually a piece of MMO rarity that I am holding in my hands. And can you tell me why this is, in my opinion, one of the rarest things that I've ever seen in an MMO?
Because you've lost the plastic cover that goes over it.
No, it kind of had a chewer on it, so it had to be destroyed. I do still have it.
I can't do that because I have the same tin, just over there-ish. I have the same tin with the same thing on it and stuff like that. But I can't take the Granic off mine, not without lasers, which are actually tempting.
Granics are somewhat more indestructible than soft, fluffy chewers. But anyway, you haven't given me a good guess. So, and to the channel as well, can anyone suggest to me why, in my opinion, I might be wrong? You may tell me I'm wrong in a moment. This is one of the rarest things I've ever seen in an MMO.
Can I tell you you're wrong now? Why do I have to wait a moment?
Well, there's always the off chance I might be right. No. Okay. Might be Matty says it's because everyone bought the online code. Not quite. I need it for the shelf behind me later. That's my excuse, and I'm sticking with it. And yes, this was self-purchased before anyone suggests otherwise. The reason why this is so rare is this is an example of something available to European players of an MMO that is not available to US players of an MMO. Now, actually, I'm all for having absolute equality between all regions in terms of where possible and where tax is allowing. Price, facilities, access, start times, the same product, the same SKUs, all that good stuff. There is no, in my mind, logical reason why people should have different offerings. But this is the first time I've ever been able to obtain something in Europe that you couldn't get in the US, and many times it's been the other way around.
Let me tell you a funny story about this. Okay. I'm not sure how much this is like ist, because this is kind of revealing some PR secrets here. So, because I write a lot about WildStar professionally, I got asked, do you want a review copy of WildStar? And I turned around and said, no, thank you. I've already got it pre-ordered, and that's all taken care of, and I'll be getting it on such and such a day, and it'll be a proper physical edition. And I also won't be doing the review. That's my good colleague, Bill Murphy, that's doing that one. I said, well, would Bill like a copy? I said, he's pre-ordered it as well. So it was like, but we paid for it. Sorry. It's tough.
It's actually good. We want it.
So that was a funny moment for us. But more recently, when I've been reading some of the reviews in progress, both Bill's and PC Gamers and others, a lot of people have started doing this rather than reviewing it once and giving it a score after playing it for like 30 hours. They'll do a review a week for 4 weeks and gradually progress it, and then give the score at the end.
And it's a better model for assessing something the size and scope of a AAA MMO. You can't absorb the content in 5 minutes.
Yeah, and I think that it's been really interesting to see that there are a lot of people really digging the game. And Penny Arcades did 2 comics about the game. The second one being about housing, which I thought was hilarious.
I haven't seen these yet, so I don't know if someone could dig out the links for me.
So I forget the topic of the first one, but the second one basically said, why is it that everyone gets to level 14 and then stops playing? He said, we haven't stopped playing. Basically, you get to level 14 and Animal Crossing opens up. You get player housing. And it's amazing. Mm-hmm. And he said, well, if you could stop mucking around with your sofa for 10 minutes, can we actually go and run this dungeon and kill Malabol? And the guy turns around and says, oh, him? Yeah, certainly. He drops a sweet end table. It's like, you could see where...
Hey, I got my orange lamp in my boombox. I'm happy. So, this is something that I want to pick up on as well. But before I do that, let's just, because I don't know if this is any different, I'm sure some people might be intrigued who have the digital version. What's actually inside one of these? Well, the most important thing inside one of these is actually this little piece of card here. Now, this code has been used and consumed, so you can zoom in on it as much as you like. It is now an X code. But this is how they actually format the code in a nice little card inside the case with a tear-off strip at the back. The box contains a few things. Something I thought was quite clever from a marketing perspective, of course, with the NCSoft heritage. We have a promo giving us 25% off Guild Wars 2, but I have that as well. And then we have the game. And of course it's on 3 discs, but it actually is really quite nice from a presentation perspective. I just thought it was nicely put together. There's no real huge tangible physical assets with this edition. There were no editions with those available. I probably would have gone and found one of them. But I just saw this and thought it was nicely put together. So those who want to know, that's what it looks like. Little touches like the extra print behind the inner and that sort of thing. But that is a steel box.
Yes. And I think it's really nicely packaged. I think they did a great job with that. And I think if you've wanted real swag, then there's things like the Rouse Dowers, which I've shipped a number of this week.
These?
Yes, those. I have one just over there next to a char, which is also just over there. It's amazing. I'm just pointing randomly. There are things behind me.
Technically, they're in front of you.
Well, technically, behind the camera. There are lots of things behind the camera.
Okay, so...
have you got the other plastic box, or the other box? Because retailers are now selling game time cards. Now, I've subscribed to WildStar, but I have a game time card. It's a 30-day game time card, which is basically in emergency break shrink wrap.
That's actually not a bad idea. I may have to get hold of one of those. I like that. There'll always be someone in the guild that will need it mid-raid. I do once remember a story of everyone walking down a corridor to pull a boss when the main tank DC'd in a game because their game time had expired. Which we had to kind of scramble and fix, which was a little awkward. So I may, as a GM, put one of those cards into my arsenal of weapons to be used when and if required. So thank you for the tip. But no, I haven't seen one. Do you have one there to show people?
Yeah, you talk to people. I'm going to go and find it.
Okay. While we're doing that, One of the biggest things we can actually take away from this, though, and from all the interactions I've had with people, is people are having fun. The anecdotal evidence I can put in with my guild hat on is every time I look at our TeamSpeak server, even if it's 4 o'clock in the morning, there are multiple people on it. And I haven't seen this level of conversation, concurrency of our players being logged in, the amount of interaction activity for a long time. I don't think I saw these levels of player interaction during the launch of, say, Guild Wars. I didn't see it during Rift. I have seen it in the heyday of Warcraft, but I haven't seen it for a while. And so to me, that's a very, very good thing. And I don't know what other people think in the channel about not just their own experiences, but the experiences of those around them. And in general, the amount of positivity from players is actually a little surprising. But on that note, Gazimoff.
Yes.
That is a game time card.
Indeed,
it's a bit more than just a card these days.
Well, it's still got a card in there, allegedly. In this box, there is a game time card. It has a load of warnings in the nationality of your choice. But this is a 30-day game time card, only for use with WildStar. And it has, it says on the back,
this is not a game.
No game included.
And I can guarantee someone somewhere has made a rush purchase for their son, daughter, significant other, grandparent, whatever it might be. And even though it's covered in warnings, they will have just grabbed that without the game. You just know it's going to have happened.
Indeed. That is my copy with the steelbook and the chewer.
But it's infested with a chewer.
It's not infested with chewer. You can't infest it with chewer. Yes, so you get this kind of plastic thing, which I think automatically just trebles the value of the box because it's got a picture of a chewer on it. And it's a really nice setup.
Okay, starting to track some of the questions that are coming in. We'll pick all those up shortly, but I'll try and round them all up into one. So please keep throwing questions, stick a queue in front so we can find them, and we'll run through them. Now, there's probably 2 more things I do want to touch on, and I guess we need to decide how many spoilers we're going to throw out there at this minute in time. But there's 2 things, really. The first one is, well, what are we seeing in the game and the UI that we've got the exposure of using it in anger, where we'd like to make some more changes? And 2, one new and quite fantastic strand of content has been opened up. And you can ask for $1 million and stroke your roused hour as much as you like live on air, Gazimoff. That doesn't mean that the Drosera instances aren't a thing. They are, and actually I think they're absolutely fantastic.
Yes.
And I don't know if you've seen them, of course, because I believe they open up at level 35 in the open world.
They do indeed. Just because I have only reached level 20 does not mean I don't have my ways and means of experiencing content.
So, do you have any thoughts on Drosera?
So, first of all, I think it's a very interesting way of deploying story to people in a contained manner. I think WildStar have done 2 very canny things. First of all, they've kept it very close to their chests until the game is actually launched. And I think that was a smart move. In fact, I just want to touch on that, or expand that ever so slightly. If you played WildStar's beta, you kind of got thrown in there with very little narrative context about what was going on. Now that the game has launched, you have intro videos, you have little touches of cutscene put together by the cinematics team using the game's own engine, dotted all the way through those opening experiences. It's made the whole thing so much better to enjoy. If you compare it one to the other, you actually understand what's going on so much better now. It provides you with much more of a background as to why you're on Nexus, why it's so important, and what you hope to get from it. Obviously, if there's more lore that you want, then I actually got a chance to speak with Chad Law and get a kind of lore primer put together, which is well worth reading if you've not dug into the WildStar story that much. But I think that overall story introduction is so much better now. But yeah, the Drusilla instances, I think they are a very, very good way of doing it. I think that they work a lot better than phasing because you can bring people into the instance and stuff like that. Whereas with phasing, you end up with people out in the world vanishing and reappearing, and it was always a kind of clumsy solution. I think with the Drusilla instances and having one world that everyone sees within reason works an awful lot better.
No, it does, and I was surprised by some of the twists and turns in the storyline. And I found myself every time I got something is happening with a portal somewhere, I found myself galloping back to go and see what it was with some urgency, because actually they're really quite fun. So for those of you thinking story, it's lore, I don't really need to do too much with this right now. No, you are missing out if you don't. You want to go and see the stuff that's cropping up. Give us your highlights of the week, Gazimoff, from a playing perspective.
From a playing perspective, so I got to be honest with you. A couple of highlights for me are it was very, very recent where you started getting prime bosses dropping around the world, yeah, and being put in places and stuff like that. And there are kind of two categories. There's the kind of ones with the red sheen, but they're still kind of called the same thing. They don't have any special names. And there's the ones, the named primes, which are really quite tough and usually will require a group of people to take down. They're not something that's solo. But the other stuff, the regular primes, as long as you know what you're doing, you can take them down. So
I will say it possibly varies. Those that have telegraphs, and if you can dodge those telegraphs, it creates the time and space for you to get distance from the mob, say if you're ranged, or to queue up the attacks, the debuffs, whatever it is you're doing. There are some out there that just do a lot of white damage.
Oh yeah.
And if you are perhaps not wearing heavy and you're a squishy spell slinger, you could try an infuriating prime many times in a row because you don't like not being able to solo something at level and have to go off in a hump deciding that you can't solo something at level. But many others indeed can be killed solo, but certainly in a duo.
Yeah, so that's been very satisfying for me, being able to take down primes, certain primes solo is very satisfying. But there was also a moment in chat where someone said, "These mobs are so hard. Are they going to take the difficulty down at all? Because it feels like I'm doing PvP all the time." And I was sitting there like grumpy cat going, "Good."
That's indeed my reaction.
In fact, I think that was my reply, all caps. Good. I really like the fact that Carbine haven't skimped on making a difficult, challenging game in the right places. I think if people are, you can level and enjoy it. It's not an overly complex and cumbersome thing, but it will require learning how to play the game, learning how to use telegraphs. And this is the thing that gets me. There are so many people on the forums, fairly wide, saying, "Oh, I played it and it was really easy because telegraphs, you can dodge them in your sleep and stuff like that." And it's like, yeah, and you probably only got up to level 5 and then walked off. You tried saying that at level 17 and up. Nah.
And I think what we'll do next week is I will return with a host of screenshots illustrating some of the maximum level telegraphs of those that haven't yet seen them. And you're going to be a little surprised, I think, unless you know what this is before we start talking about it. So that's your positive. Is there a negative? Is there something we have gone, oh, game-wise, that wasn't quite what I was hoping for?
Yeah, and this is something that I think other people have picked up on as well. I love the new UI, don't get me wrong. I think it's very slick. It really helps to give the game a sense of identity. But the auction house and commodities exchange UI really needs an overhaul. And I'm not sure if Carbine are going to be able to do it themselves, or if it's going to take a couple of people, just
Genius
a bit of
add-on
time.
authors.
Well, yeah, I think that it's going to require someone to come in with an add-on and make something that actually does the auction house properly. Which I hate to say, but it's really sorely needed. It's functional, don't get me wrong. For the people who just want to dip in and buy stuff, it's fine. For the people who want to actually play the economy, we need something.
The concepts are there, but what I hope happens, if someone does come up with Better Auction House Volume 2, or whatever it might be, what I'd like to see is Carbine identify that this now is better from a UI UX perspective and adapt it back into the core game, taking on board the advice and giving credit to the person that comes up with the relevant thing. Because what I wouldn't like to see is maintaining an add-on ad infinitum when it should be part of core. That's not to take away the work of someone that does produce a fantastic add-on, and we've got to decide as a community how far we want it to go. There are add-ons for things like Warcraft that are incredibly detailed with how you can run the auction house. I like them and use them, but they're not for everybody. So I'd like to see something with a nice little advanced arrow that hits a halfway house that lets you hide stuff or not, depending on what you're trying to do.
I have to ask, is someone trying to steal your car?
No, there are currently alarms and stuff going off over there across the road outside the studio, and I'm resisting the urge to go and see what's going on. And I was desperately hoping it didn't come through on camera. However, it's Friday night in the wilds of Huddersfield, and who knows what's happening out there. I'm going to stay here where it's safe.
Can't blame that. So, a couple of bits and pieces, I think, in terms of future plans for WildStar. I think the key thing I'm looking forward to, apart from climbing all the way up to 50, and I have the entire weekend set aside to really shoot through content. This week has really kind of crit me for really annoying real-life crits, and some people get to take the week off work, it's like...
And still had to do work for a day and a half, but hey.
A day and a half out of 5. I mean, come on. No wonder you're level... In fact, why are you only level 45?
I'm doing reasonably well there for me.
So, apart from that, I'm looking forward to really digging into the whole a weekend of WildStar. And I might even do a bit of live streaming. But there's also new stuff on the horizon as well. This is what I want to get to level 54. So we've got Blighthaven coming up before the end of the month, we're told. So it'll probably before the end of June, probably. It might be the 31st of June, but
just to
that's
pause
a whole
you,
new zone.
Just to pause you, if we talk about that, something to throw into the mix here and now so people know, and please spread the word, guys. We have some guests on Cosmotronic next week.
Oh, really?
Oh, really?
Oh, really?
And
this is even news to me.
This is even news to you. Aha!
This is why I'm going, oh, really?
And we have the redoubtable UK community lead, better known as...
Mr. Anlath?
Mr. Anlath. Mark Anlath Holmes is going to be here live on the show. And he's going to have a guest with him.
Oh, really?
Now, we know who we want the guest to be, we know who we think the guest is going to be, but of course, it's early days live after an MMO launch, so we're very happy to accept the fact that things could happen between now and then. So we're not going to say who's going to be with us, other than Anlath, who's definitely going to be here, but Anlath plus guest is where we think we're going, and might have some new content to talk about.
Ooh.
And we might have a chance to be fielding all of your questions. And if that is the case, and if there is still a WildStar stream, we will coordinate start time so we're not overlapping. So keep a close eye on the social channels, guys and girls.
Actually, I have just heard that Carbine are moving their WildStar Weekly to Thursdays. So we will be able to reclaim dominance of the Friday.
Very useful. And we can, yes, you can all come and get your Friday fix here from now on onwards. But Blighthaven, then I'm going to do my like and dislike, and then we're going to take the questions.
Okay, so Blighthaven, new level 50 world story zone, packed full of information about the Elden, what they were doing on Nexus, and where they went.
And I'm going to be a little less worried about spoilers next week as more people have had a chance to experience the content. So we're going to be talking about the storyline a bit more, some of the stuff that's actually gone on.
If you spoil any stuff for me, I will reach through the internet and punch you in the face. So be warned.
You'd better start leveling a little bit quicker there, Mr. Gazimoff.
I have to work for my pennies.
As do we all. Now, I said I'd just pick up on a couple of things, good and bad. The highlight of the week for me, I think, was seeing the guild spring into action on, I think it was Saturday afternoon, and we took down the first Metal More Prime kill on the server. So that was a lot of fun. We had a lot of people a little bit under level, so it was a little tricky, but a lot of fun was had by all. And really just seeing the community come together. As I was saying when you went away, the game is bringing the community together in a way that I haven't seen recently in the launch of another MMO. Yeah. And I'm really hoping this isn't just a fig roll of my imagination, and it's as real as I perceive it to be, because if it is, it's going to say very healthy things for WildStar's long-term community, for guilds and communities out there everywhere, and indeed for the game. As to the negative, we found one thing that we're going to quickly scramble and add on to fix unless a quick patch comes out from Carbine. Warning to guild leaders out there everywhere. /G and /GO, so guild and guild officer, your chat channels, are both tagged with the guild name, and the colour variance is minimal. Therefore, guild officers do have the ability to reply, believing they're replying to a private channel, and reply to a public channel. This could be bad. This is something we didn't notice or pick up on in the beta, so slap to us and to others out there for not finding it, but you have been warned. Be very careful with your shades of green, and I think if there isn't a fix-it out in the next week, we will have produced one, courtesy hopefully of the mighty Jeradar, and get it out in the public domain, because that's bad.
Would you have happened to have committed any social faux pas as a result of this?
Well, if there were a social faux pas, thankfully it wasn't by me, and it would have been minor, so I will ignore it. Not saying there has been such a social faux pas, of course. But please do heed that, those of you who are in positions of officerial responsibility in guilds. Double check your replies, your /G, your /GO, and your shades of green, because they are very close to each other, and that's an accident waiting to happen.
Oh, yes.
It is time. I know you're going to be asking me exactly what it was later. It is time for the questions. We're going to roll through and take a look at a few and see what people have to say. Right. Scrolling, just looking for the cues in the chat. Not the ones that take a long time, of course. The ones that mean we need to answer. I see a lot of conversation I'm having to scroll through, however. And I know that I saw some questions. Where are they hiding? Right, there we go. What do people think of the horrible drop rates for leather and bone? Outfitter is so painful. Now, I'm not sure I personally have found this, but I am at the survivalist end of the pointy stick. And I found that just through normal leveling, I gave one of our outfitters sort of in the guild stacks of bone and stacks of like 60 plus of each one of the leathers. Wasn't particularly difficult. What I don't know, of course, is how many an outfitter is actually using. Do you have a view?
I am playing with a armourer miner, so I do not have a view there, I'm afraid. I mine all of my own ores and then use them for making In fact, not armor, weaponsmithing. Beg your pardon. So I'm playing Minor Weaponsmith. Keris is playing Relic Hunter Technologist. So, no, sorry.
Okay. Another question then. We're picking up on this sort of guild activity theme. And I'll make it generic, although it's been addressed to us specifically. Do we think guild activity will be the same 3 months from now? What's your take, Mr. Gazimoff?
So, if you have a good, strong, solid community that you've built up around your guild, then I think, yes, you'll be fine, as long as the guild itself doesn't feel pulled away from the game that you have chosen. So I think with WildStar, because you're there with a purpose to either raid or do war plots or do something or other, I'm surprised no one's stolen that car yet.
I think it's a building, not a car, actually, but there we go.
I'm surprised no one's stolen that building then. So I think that as long as you've got a purpose behind your guild, then yeah, it'll be absolutely fine. I think if you've got a guild that's one of these kind of cross-gaming alliances, stuff like that, and you find something shiny and interesting that comes along that distracts a lot of your players, then yeah, that might be a bit tough. But I think that overall it's going to be a bit of an easier thing to do with WildStar, partly because they've got their monthly content patches, which are actually meaty content patches, rather than being very, very light and basic and stuff like that. And as long as they've got new raid tiers for people to dive into once they've completed the first, no problem at all. But yeah, I think that'll be fine.
And my first sense is that communities are going to find a home here. There is plenty to do. I'm already not seeing the issues I've seen in the first week of other games with the guild. So that the people that get to max level quickly and go, where is everyone? What do we do now? And the ones where people are just saying, oh, I'm logging out to play another game for half an hour, then logging back. I'm not seeing that. It's just WildStar from everybody. I glance over right now, I can see 40-something people logged in at 9:10 on a Friday night, when usually on a Friday night it's historically quiet because people have social lives. So the early signs and indicators are good, and I think if it stopped, I think if the guild is set up and structured correctly, you're probably going to be in a good place. Right, let's see what else we have. Can we pick any more questions out the chat? Do we have any? Last call for questions.
Someone's saying, come to Contagion, it's nice here. I am actually going to be rolling a PvP character. I do really, really enjoy WildStar's PvP, and I want to get onto... I want to have a good PvP ult, which will probably still be a true engineer, I know. But that's less critical. I just want to find a good PvP community to get to level 6 and then just PvP all the way through. So
I may at some point rustle up a character for PvP purposes, but I have plenty to do to keep me busy.
Yeah, you've got to get to level 50 first.
That will probably be happening before I go to bed at 7 o'clock tomorrow morning. So I can do other stuff over the weekend. In fact, that is the plan. We hopefully next week we'll have some more things to talk about. We'll be able to start talking about attunement. We're going to have probably by tomorrow in excess of our first 20-person raid team leveled and working on attunements. Then the real work starts. We're going to be talking a little bit about crafting experiences, and we'll have our experiences of people getting up to various craft professions. We're, of course, going to have guests on, and we're going to have new content to talk about, so there is going to be an action-packed show. We'll update you on start times, and, we may even make sure there's a decent post-show to field those questions afterwards. But on that note, this, I think, has been the WildStar post-launch analysis, and so far, touch wood, no major disasters yet, but a few works in progress to tweak.
Yeah, I would agree with that synopsis. Yeah, I'd say that's fair.
If you were Jeremy Gaffney, and 3 months ago someone offered you the scenario of being here today with things going exactly how they've gone, would you take it?
Yeah, without a doubt.
Yeah.
Considering how bad things can be, I'd take this launch over a lot of launchers.
Indeed. So, while you're busy leveling, crafting, adventuring, PvPing,
Working.
going splat horribly as you get shot in Nexus, spare a thought for the people that have put in years and years of work to allow you to be there, controlling those pixels. Well done, Carbine. This is MMOBuff, and that is the end of the show. Say goodbye, Gazzy.
Goodbye.
Catch you, folks. Been a pleasure as always.